So in this webinar, we're going to cover the basics of getting started as a partner agency with a Volunteer Action Center, also known as a VAC. So we're going to start off with the sign-up process, just very quickly run through that, and then we're going to run through the basics of getting started with your account. Now we're not going to cover every feature of the system for your basic accounts, but we will cover the main ones needed to get started. So to start off, you can sign up through connect.fundly.com. However, chances are I would actually recommend going to the public portal for the Volunteer Action Center you're working with. Here's a demo one that I've kind of hastily put together. And actually signing up through that portal. Because what this is going to actually do is associate you with that organization and kind of save you some time. So what you'll do is go to their page, and they've probably provided you with a link and possibly even instructions on how to do this particularly, if they've got a different flow than what I'm going through. And under organizations, there will probably be a become a partner or some other similar link that will direct you into the sign up process. So if you already happen to have an account, you can actually skip this step and go ahead and go straight to login. Otherwise, go ahead and provide your EIN, organization name. You may have gotten any, like I said, instructions from your organization where they may have supplied you with the name they have on file. I recommend strongly that you use exactly the name they give you, so just copy and paste it in, as this will link you up with any existing record they may have for you. Otherwise, you can use your EIN. If you are a organization that is fiscally sponsored by another, you don't need to supply your EIN. Just go ahead and use your organization name as described. So we can go ahead here and just put a fake EIN in to go just get to the next step, sign up, and go ahead and provide any information that is required. The more information provided, the better. So you'll go ahead and provide your username, password, your organization's information, type of organization, address, and the primary contact at your organization. Your next step, you'll go ahead and provide the causes that actually your organization supports. So those are basically the grander picture. Things like animals, social welfare, things of that nature. And then you go ahead and finalize. In the finalization step, you can go ahead and just select the free account. So for time purposes, I am not going to go through the entire flow, but it is, beyond this step, pretty straightforward. Just be aware in the final step, there will be options for paid account options. You do not need to use any of those to work with your Volunteer Action Center, so you can pick the free option and then finalize. Once that's all complete and you're signed up, you'll get your login credentials and you can go ahead and log in. As mentioned before, you can log in connect.fundly.com, or you can use your Volunteer Action Center's portal and do organization login. And that's what I'm going to do right now. So organization login. Now, here we go, free back. And one thing I do want to mention, there is another step involved here, and it's going to vary based on the organization you're working with, and that is basically the approval process. Some organizations will require that you go through some approval processes before you're actually fully associated with them. So that's why it's also important to fill out as much information as possible during the registration process and to do it from their public portal so that you can get any custom fields they may have provided for you. So once you have been approved, however, you will see under My Associations the organization you're associated with, and you will be able to publish to that organization's public portal per your agreement with them. Otherwise, if you haven't been approved, you won't be able to publish to them yet, or if by chance you went through the Fundly Connect website directly, you will need to create your connection via Add Association. So Add Association, look for your organization, and you can create the association that way. But having gone through their public portal, that actually will already be done for you. So it saves you a step. That's why I recommend it. But like I said, if they provide you with specific instructions, follow their instructions, as they may vary a little bit from what I'm providing here. But let's go ahead and look at this account. So let's start with a really quick overview. This is our dashboard. This is where you get when you log in. It gives you a brief synopsis of what's going on your site. Here is an example of a free account like you'll be using, basic account. There's a little bit of data in it, not too much. So we have the quick menu here. We have the association menu, the inbox, i.e. communications, the account menu, and the main menu. Now I mentioned we aren't going to get through every feature today, but hopefully we'll get through enough to get you started. So first thing I mentioned was the association. You may need to do that. The next is we have a couple of options up here. We have the quick search. This will let you look for volunteers by name, for example, or you can do an advanced search. So if I have a volunteer named Bob, type it in, hit enter, and it will look for everybody with the name Bob, first or last name, by the way. And pull that up, and it turns out I only have one Bob, so it goes straight to his record. We get the synopsis of his details, what opportunities he's linked to. You may know opportunities by other names, such as project or activity, but in our system they are called opportunities. So a bit of a mapping of names there in case you are familiar with a different term. And he is a volunteer. He will have a PIN number. This will come up in various things in the future. We're not going to focus too much on it right now, but I do want to be aware that this is make you aware of where to find it. So that's finding a record. If we did a result, say we do an advanced search and find results that are a bit more broad, so let's say, let's actually look for all people who have an email. Just they have an email. So email, our operator is not empty, search, we can do more complex searches, but we'll keep it simple for our purposes today. This will find everybody with an email, and we will get a search result. So here's all my volunteers. We have some detail. We can click on the name to see the screen before we saw before. We can edit, and we can do a few other options here, like assigning them to an opportunity. And we'll see that later on. We can also update the search that we ran. To add a volunteer, well, we have the quick add menu here. And this actually lets us do a couple of things. We have add volunteer, add opportunity, we'll see another way to do this, and a quick add hours option. So add volunteer will take us into the add edit screen for a volunteer. This is very similar to, this is basically the same screen you'd get if you edited a volunteer. So in this case though, we can add someone on the back end, fill in their information. If we provide an email, we can send them a link to basically take control of their account. That is the ideal. So that's how we add a volunteer. Most of the fields are pretty self-explanatory. Just make sure that you do provide first name, last name, and ideally an email. So that's adding a volunteer. Once they've been added, they will show up in searches, and we can now work with them. So before we can work with our volunteers, though, we have some configurations we have to do. So now we're going to move out of volunteers directly, and we will touch on them again. And let's go into the various configurations that we may have to do to get our account fully operational and start posting to our Volunteer Action Center. So to start with, let's take a peek at the main menu, Configurations. We're not going to cover all the items here as mentioned. Let's just actually cover one particularly important one and then give just a point out for a few of them. So to point out, there are some search tags that we will be using in our opportunities later. Activity types, causes, we talked a little bit of that earlier. Age group, population served, skills, age group served, and that's it. That's only those are the 6 search tags. So we will see these again later, but if you need to create new options for these search tags, this is where you can find them. There are a few other options here we're not going to talk about right now, but be aware of your email notifications. So any emails that might come from your system to you or a volunteer, not too many. Most stuff comes from the VAC directly as opportunities come through or go to them. But this is where you'll find those and you can modify the lingo. Most of it's for you. But custom data sets, this is an important piece. So the system, as we saw when we edited a volunteer record, does come with a number of fields. Those fields, are the ones that come with the system. They're built in, they're pretty straightforward, but you might need to track things beyond those. And that's where custom data sets will come in. So we're going to go through this very quickly. Custom data sets allow you to extend the system and basically track anything you want to. So for example, while we track birth date and gender, you may also want to track ethnicity, income level, maybe education, to kind of get a sense of the kind of people who are volunteering in your area, or maybe you need that for a grant. For grant purposes, they're always asking for interesting information. So what a custom data set lets us do is create a container, a grouping, a data set of questions, where those questions are basically fields that you have created. So your data set will usually be, like I said, a collection of fields that have something in common, like demographic information, tutoring information. So tutoring information would have things that you might need for tutors, demographics for general demographics. We go down here to add new data set. So I'm just going to edit one I have existent, give it a name and a description, and who is it for. So Volunteer will, as tells you here, will show up during the application process. Opportunity is going to be used for application forms, which is really the important piece because that's where you can actually have the volunteer fill out the question. And we'll show those in a few minutes. So normally speaking, you're probably always going to be using opportunity, but you may occasionally have it during the application process. But that's more applicable to the VAC itself, to be honest. So here we have 3 fields. I have a checkbox, drop down a radio button. To add a new field, give it a name, pick the type. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory. Text is text, email is for an email, date is, let's give you a date picker, yes, no is a radio button, yes, no, number, well, a number, and so on. And is it required? Or possibly even staff use only. So required means they have to fill it out online, or staff member, if they're editing a record, will have to fill it out. And staff use only means it will not be shown even if the data set is included on an application form. So this can be used for things like, did you get a minor release? Well, the minor isn't going to be telling you that. You're going to be verifying that manually. Background checks, although there's a different process for that, so actually it's not a great example. Fingerprinting, if you do require fingerprinting, that's an example that comes up. Or maybe you have to verify some other sort of certifications. So anything that you need to verify, you want to track for your purposes, but the volunteer doesn't need to see, staff use only. And just fill out your details, hit save, and it adds it over here where we can edit and, for example, delete. I'm going to go ahead and edit this ethnicity checkbox and see that we have options. We can add options, we can rearrange them, we can delete them, and so on. Save field, we're all done. So that's our custom data sets. A very powerful tool, can extend the system in a variety of ways. So where do we use these custom data sets? I keep mentioning application forms, and that's actually our next piece. So if we go back to our main menu, so we're exiting configurations. Like I said, there's a few things there we skipped. We're going to go to Design Application Form. And so this is usually your next step. Once you've reviewed your configurations, we're now getting into the realm of actually creating our opportunities. But before that, we probably want to start creating some forms. Your system won't come with any. You don't have to use forms if you don't want to, but they are a very useful way of getting additional data. So here I've got 2 forms. I can add new forms with the Add New button down here. Generally speaking, if you're on a page where you can create something new or save or move to the next page, it's down here in the bottom right, possibly the left like a previous button. This is called the action bar. You never really need to know that's what it's called, but that's what it's called. So let's go ahead and edit a form. Let's edit my general form. And there's not too much on, oh, actually I put more on here than I last remembered. So here I have name, birth date, address, and even my demographic field. So I can add more to this form. Down here, add field. So for example, emergency contact information. This isn't actually asked during the registration process for the volunteer. We try to keep that as simple as possible. So this is probably something you want to put on every application form you do, because things happen and you want to know who to contact. So emergency contact, let's move it up. I can edit it and make it required. I can also give user guidelines saying, this should be someone that you, can get a hold of easily. So not like a parent that's 100 miles away, like mine are. Not that they are my emergency contact anymore, but, bad, example. So a spouse or local friends or something like that. We can remove something by clicking on the delete button here, and that'll drop it off. If we want to add a custom data set, and then select it. So here I would have selected demographic, it's already added in, and it would dump it in. And let's go ahead and drop address back in there. So pretty simple to use this form. We can also, as you saw, move things around. So for example, if I want address a little higher up the page, let's drop it in. And we should already have the volunteer's email, but in case we don't, we could put that in as too. If a volunteer has already filled out data that's on this form, it will already be filled in and they just need to update. So sometimes forms can double as simply a confirmation. All right, and that includes our custom data sets, by the way. So go ahead and save. Our form is completed. We can move on. A form can be used by multiple different opportunities, but a given opportunity can only have one form, so keep that in mind. If you can't have like a base form and then kind of tack on additionals, you'd actually have to build those additionals with all the previous data. So it's not hierarchical. Alrighty, so now we have our forms, we have our custom data sets, we're all ready to create opportunities. So let's go through that. in the next 15 minutes, and we should be able to finish on time. So our opportunities will be where you will find all your opportunities, both active, over here on the left, and inactive, i.e. past. Opportunities come in two flavors, basic and advanced. Basic opportunities are, well, simpler than an advanced opportunity, but the main difference is going to be your scheduling piece that we would have in an advanced. I've got a couple of here. Let's go ahead and edit them and just use them. Otherwise, you would just go create, add basic or add advanced. So, food packing. Let's use this one. So this is an opportunity where people show up and pack food, maybe for a homeless shelter or maybe just for some other purpose. Maybe they're sending care packages to vets or something like that. Excuse me, military personnel overseas, something of that nature. I'm gonna go ahead and edit it. So this is gonna bring up. Okay. So this takes us to the basic screen, the basic information screen. This is our first step. Opportunity name, pretty straightforward. It's what it's going to be called. It's going to be what shows online. Make it nice and descriptive. It's basically kind of like your job posting. Opportunity owner, which user. So in your case, it's always going to be me. As basic accounts, you only have the one user. Positions, we don't use this much in basic, but this is a way to break up an opportunity into different sub-jobs, I guess you could call it, since I already used the job analogy. So for food packing, maybe we have different people doing different things. Some are packers, maybe some are wrappers. That might be an example. The location it will be at, and it's going to default to the location you put for your organization. And then opportunity details. This is basically what shows up on the web page. This is your content, so the job description. And then we have scheduling. So for a basic opportunity, we have very simple scheduling. There's one time, i.e. one day, or ongoing, some sort of time frame. Right. So you might say it's for, we're in June currently, so it might be June 1st through June 31st. So, a month. And we're not kind of specifying specific days, just in that time period. Let's go back to one time. That was what this was before. And then we have, so this is our schedule, when the opportunity is happening, i.e. the days. And then we have the shift, basically the times it's happening on. Now this is actually more nebulous configuration because it uses the time is flexible option. You have two choices. You can say a actual time frame, kind of like you would for a job, 9 to 5, 4 to 2. That's reverse time, 2 to 4, excuse me, for like a 2-hour shift, something like that. Or time is flexible, which would indicate the volunteer kind of comes and goes as needed. And so ongoing, for example, with time is flexible would indicate that you have people showing up like for a week at some point doing something, maybe doing it on their own time, like delivering flyers, and then they just report back to you the hours they did. So different ways to do the scheduling. You can be very concrete or very flexible. And then shift name, I usually recommend something descriptive about what you're doing all day, Mondays or something like that. So it will help the volunteers schedule themselves if you allow it. So that's our scheduling piece, the days, time, and what have you, and then the times. Our next page, save in next, our next page is the requirements tab. So this is basically a combination of search tags and a variety of settings. So our search tags, I'll give you some quick definitions for those, and then we'll go into the settings. So causes, as mentioned earlier, are basically the bigger picture that this opportunity addresses. So if you're an arts center, for example, it would be arts and culture, which is what my example here is. The activity, basically what are you doing in support of that cause? So I don't actually have one that matches, so I'd probably want to create one. Oh, collecting, sorting, and packaging. There we go. That's what you're doing. And then the skills you might need in support of that activity, which is supporting the bigger cause. So I don't have any skills that are pertinent here. These will allow a person to find your opportunity if, for example, they're looking for doing a certain thing. So they're like, I really love packaging things up. It's a lot of fun. I'm going to go see what opportunities are out there for packaging. And they could look for collecting, sorting, and packaging, and they'd find this opportunity. Same for skills. So I could say, hey, I'm good at admin stuff, and they could find opportunities that use admin for administrative skills, and so on. Who is benefiting? So once again, search tags, if somebody wants to help a certain age group or population or gender, you can set these if appropriate, and they'd find the opportunity based on those search tags. So if you're a women's or men's shelter and you're benefiting one gender over another, and someone says, I want to go help at a women's shelter, basically, and they can search for opportunities that benefit women or men, and they'd find this opportunity. And then, what's the appropriate age group for volunteers? Now, for something like this, maybe children, under 13, they can still be helpful for packaging, but maybe not. So it's up to you. You can create your own age groups. Of all the search tags, including the one that is actually required causes, this is, in my opinion, the most important search tag, because whenever I get a phone call from like a volunteer, because sometimes they get a hold of me, I'm not sure how, they, looking for an opportunity. A lot of times they're either a child, under 18, minor, looking for something for school, or a parent trying to find something for their 13-year-old son or daughter. And, I say, hey, there's a search tag, try that. And then they don't actually find anything, or they find stuff inappropriate for their age that was mislabeled. So this actually is a very important tag for volunteers, as this seems to be the most often searched for tag of, from my experience working with volunteers. So I want to put a little extra emphasis on that. And our last option here is kind of half tag, half setting, so that's going to move us into the next piece, is do you allow teams? So it is possible for say, a bunch of people at a company to band together as a team and sign up for an opportunity. So something like packing would make sense for a team. You just need people. There's no special skills. You don't need to do any vetting, any special vetting. And so you might allow teams. And then there's a question of, do you need to know who the team members are, or just that, the Fundly team is bringing 5 people. So if you're working maybe at something in your school, you'd probably need to know for legal purposes. Something at a beach or just packaging, you probably don't care. Okay, so that's our search tags and kind of a setting. From here, we get into the actual setting pieces. So the first one is, do we require a form? So let's say, yes, we need the general form. We can edit it from here or add it, and this will actually partially take you out of the process, so be warned on that. Next is, there is an add-on feature called Time It, which is basically using PIN numbers. You can have a volunteer punch in and punch out, kind of like at a job. And whether or not they are auto punched out is what this setting dictates. We won't be talking about that feature today, so we're going to kind of keep moving. There's another feature we're going to see before we depart today called marking someone as attended. Whether or not doing so will automatically log their hours is what this does. It is on automatically. I recommend leaving that setting on. We'll see it later. And then whether or not we allow a volunteer to cancel themselves is this setting here. How many hours beforehand can they cancel themselves? In which case they can do that from their account. Over here, we have a couple of settings. So, starting from the top, when a volunteer gets to this point, the scheduling point in our process, can they do it themselves? Or does an admin have to do it? Yes or no? Mine's currently on. Can they log an hour? So after they've scheduled and they've been volunteering, can they say, yeah, I showed up, I did 10 hours? And you'll still have to verify it, but do you allow them to do that? If you don't, then only an admin can do that. Currently, I'm allowing it. Is approval required for their application? So after they apply and fill out their form, will you need to vet it before they actually get listed as a volunteer and can move on to whatever the next step is? So that's what this is currently on. And the last one is, do we require an orientation or training? Now, we haven't talked about this yet. Unfortunately, for time purposes, we won't be able to cover it today. But orientations and trainings, you can configure those, kind of like an opportunity, where you can create the sessions, and basically you can say a person has to come to an orientation or training. Which one do they have to go to? So they have to go to the general volunteer orientation, and we'll have to mark that they're going to a specific one, and once after they've gone, that they have attended, and then the system will let them proceed. So that's our last setting. For reference, if I have everything on, the flow for a volunteer is they find their opportunity. They hit the apply button. If they haven't already, they log in. If they have no login, they sign up as a volunteer. They then go to the application form, if there's one present. They fill out the application form and they hit the final submit button. They will then be, since we have approval required on, be added to a queue pending your approval. You will then either reject or approve them, at which point they'll be added into the opportunity as a volunteer. Since I have orientation and training set up to be on, they will now need to go to an orientation or training. So either they, from their account, or you will sign them up for a particular session of the orientation. They will go. You will mark them as having attended. they will then be needing to be scheduled. When are they going to show up? If you allow them to do it, they can do it from their dashboard. Otherwise, you do it. They're now scheduled. They volunteer. And then hours are logged either by them or by you using either one of multiple mechanisms, and volunteerism continues from there. So that's the flow for reference purposes that can be triggered. Any one of those pieces can be turned on or off. So let's move on. So we're getting a little short on time. So save and next. Okay, our final piece here is the actual publication process. So when you first come here, this will actually be turned off. Ignore the fact it says my name, my demo account and all that. But you'll see the name of the volunteer action center you want to publish to. You'll probably only have the one for the one that you're working with, but you could theoretically have two if there's two in your area that you're working with. You'll select the volunteer action center. If there's a particular program, which we haven't really talked about, but basically initiatives, like the United Way has their Earn It, Keep It, Save It VITA program that does tax preparation, for example. You might be posting an opportunity to that program, in which case you'll select that too, and then there will be approval processes there potentially in place. So let's not use that here. And so you'll select your volunteer action center you want to publish to, and then hit the Published Action Center button. That's simple, but you will need to make sure to do those two steps. If you do not see any options here, you are not fully associated with an action center. It means that either that you're not associated at all, or if you do see them associated here, you may not yet be approved by them, in which case you will want to contact your volunteer action center that you're working with and ask them if there's any further data they may need from you or where you are in the process, because there may be further steps and they may not have had a chance to contact you yet. So keep that in mind. If blank, contact the volunteer action center. If and make sure that you're properly associated with them, as we've discussed. All right, so that is a basic opportunity. Let's take a quick look at a advanced opportunity, which has only really two differences. So here's our advanced gallery docents. I'm going to edit. The change we see here is now we can add multiple locations, and we don't do our scheduling here. So we can add multiple locations in case the opportunity is happening at different places. So maybe we're doing our packaging at different places. Maybe we have different galleries that need docents. And now we have a step 3, schedule and shift. So we're going to run through this fairly quickly. We select our location we want to schedule for, so our default location. We pick our scheduling type. One time and ongoing still exist, but now we have a weekly, a monthly, and an other option, weekly being the most common. Weekly lets you say it's going to be every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or some combination therein, or the first, second, or whatever of the month for some time period. Monthly is just a fixed day of the month, and other is going to be helpful for erratic schedules where it jumps around a little bit, or each schedule is something rather a bit more kind of particular review. You can create multiple schedules for a single location as needed. Let's run with the weekly here. So I could say this is every Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, I can't click today, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, for example. And then, except for certain dates, so we can add date exceptions, and then save, it's going to add the schedule over here, at which point I can create shifts. So as we discussed earlier, the shifts are the actual time. So kind of one example I use here is kind of think of the schedule as when is the store open? What days of the week? Kind of a retail example for anyone who's done that. So the store is open Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then the shifts are when do the employees show up? So this can be put it up in any way we need to. So we can get really inventive. So I'm going to edit this one. I could create a weekday morning. And so it represents Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but not Saturday. And it's from this time to this time. And this is where our positions come in. I need 2 volunteers. So we didn't create positions here. I could also do a weekday morning or a Monday morning and then do a Tuesday morning and a Wednesday morning. It really depends on what you need. So I'm not going to run through every example. I'm mostly just kind of giving the flavor of it. So basically, write down what your schedules are, how you want to do your scheduling. Do you want to do blocks? So a weekday shift, or do you want to do a Monday shift separate from a Tuesday shift? It's really up to your needs. Volunteers can have multiple shifts. Depends on what you're up to. So that's scheduling and shifts. When you're creating your orientations, by the way, your shifts are basically your sessions. Works about the same way. Okay. And that's advanced opportunities. So you may not need them, you may need them. Um, if you want more details, there is support available for that, as well as webinars. But for our purpose today, I just kind of wanted to introduce it to you and give you the general flow. Okay, so we have now successfully created, and then publishing is the same way. So let's go back to our opportunities. We have now successfully created all of our opportunities. We've now been posting them to our Volunteer Action Center, and so now volunteers can sign up. So volunteers will see the opportunity online. So ideally, that will be the way that volunteers will be linked to our opportunities. However, there are other ways that we can do this. And so let's start by talking about the other way, and then we'll talk about the online process. So the other way is a manual ad. And that's pretty simple to do. Pick your opportunity. Let's do the gallery docent. And we can just click the assign button here, or from the menu over here, assign volunteer. Let's use this one, why not? We can choose a volunteer currently in the system, either that we've added manually or that has registered online. Select their name, assign volunteer. Okay, he's already been applied. Or we can create a new person. So Terry, do I have a Terry? All right, Terry Campbell. Why not? I don't know where that name came from. Campbell, spelled wrong, whatever. Doesn't exist in our system. I click out, and we can add him or her to the system really quickly. So that's kind of a truncated ad. And then we can go into the record later and update. And, oops, I forgot to hit sign volunteer. Oh, I did hit, so, and then you would have hit assign volunteer, but I was moving too quickly. And they'd be in the volunteer list. So that's how you can do it manually. If they're coming in online, which is the ideal, if you've required that they be vetted, i.e. approval is required, they will, before they're added to the main pool, they will be added to this queue of volunteers awaiting approval, and you should receive an email. And you can then click on this number. You can see, so we have Greg Dice here, and you can reject him outright if you wanted to. Or if you have created an application form for this opportunity, you can hit approve. It'll ask you, do you want to review that application form? I'm going to say, yes, I do. Otherwise, it would have been an instant approve if there was no application form. And I can go ahead and review his answers and see what I feel about them. If I say, you know what, I'd like to actually talk to him, I can do a save only and come back to it. I can save and approve, or I could reject it and go back. So I'm going to do a save only here. Oop, it's yelling at me about required fields, so I'm just going to go back actually. And I'm going to use it for an example later on, but that's how you can approve them. Once a volunteer is approved, they are now in your list. And I can go into my list, so let's go to Gallery Docents. I can just click on the number or Manage Volunteers from the right, and I can see what step everybody is in. So I'll run with this example. There's a step, we're skipping it for time purposes, and I don't have an example here, and it was the orientations and trainings. Our next step column, by the way, is going to tell us what we do next. So we can just go down the line and do whatever's next. So if I had an orientation and training required, that would actually be my next step. So I might say orientation attendance required, click on that, sign them up for the session, or I might have to actually say that they did show up. That might be my next step, and then I click on that and say when they showed up. So that's there. I'm going to skip it for today for time purposes. Our next step from there would be to schedule them. Say when will they actually be a volunteer. So Eric Metzler, me, is going to be scheduled, and I can go ahead and say schedule. So he's going to be, what location. I get to pull the shifts from my configuration. So he's going to do the weekend shift as a volunteer. I can do by day of week, and so I can say, okay, he's going to do Saturday, or I could pick specific dates, but I usually prefer doing the by day of week. And then, it's going to fill in the default for that schedule, but I could override this. So maybe he's only agreed to go to 2 o'clock. So only do a 3 instead of a 3.5 hour shift. At which point, once I say what he's going to do, I hit save. If I need to add multiple, as I mentioned, it's possible, save and add new. I'm going to just close it out and keep that as an example for later. So next, he volunteers. They go and they do their thing, and they show up, and they'd be awesome, and help you out. And once they're done volunteering, we go ahead and we can log their hours. And that's going to be our final piece today. Well, there'll be one more piece actually after that. So log hours. This is, we pick the, the thing that they've been signed up for. There it is. And we can just go day by day, how many hours they did. So this is helpful, but a bit manual. There's another piece that I actually find a bit more useful, and it's the attendance piece I mentioned earlier. So once they're scheduled, once they're logging hour, once we need to log hours, and they start showing up, we can start going to this attendance page. We can pull up a day, so it's pulling up today's day, and we can simply say, yeah, Mike Portnoy, he showed up. And so it's going to mark him as attended, which is reportable. So we can actually get or we can mark him as a no-show, and that's also reportable. And so that way we can actually get statistics on what's the percentage of attendance versus no-shows, very important data, and it's going to log the hours. So our shift was a 3.5 hour shift. Mike Portnoy should now have an additional 3.5 hours logged. So we can click on his hours, click on verified hours, and we will see for gallery docents, let's see, what is today, 22nd, 2 hours. Okay, so I guess he was scheduled for 2. It'll log the 2 hours. So he had a 2-hour shift, it logged the 2 hours for me. I can override though if I need to. So maybe he did actually do a 3.5 hours. And I can save, and all is well. So that attendance piece is a very useful piece. It not only helps you keep track of are they showing up, but how many hours they did. Because you can have a person with 50 hours over a course of a year. That seems great. But if you go in and you check their attendance and you find that 50% of the time they're a no-show, that's not so great. So that's why that attendance piece is so potent and powerful, because it gives you the kind of a double piece of data. Not just a number, but an actual, kind of quality, I guess you could say, of the volunteer. So that is managing your volunteer. I mean, that's most of what you do. The last piece, I'm going to cover it in the last 8 minutes, is how to communicate with your volunteers. So we can do this on a couple of different levels. So one of them is by opportunity. I can go to our opportunities. And we pick an opportunity, let's pick the one with the most people in it, and I can go to communicate and basically send a letter, I guess you could call it, a mass mailing, to everyone in the opportunity. So here I'll go ahead and say the name of my communication. This is for internal references, so document, reminder, and sender name. Monte Cristo Art Center is my fake organization I use for these things. Sender email, so I'm going to use our support email because fundly.com. Then you put something in there, and the subject, reminder about documents we need. So sender name, sender email, subject, ignore this piece for our purposes today, and then the template. So I already have one I've created previously. The template is the content. So it's kind of like a MailChimp campaign, if you ever worked with that, where you create a template and you can just store it away, pull it up, edit it as needed. I can create a new template. I can edit my existing. I'm not going to go through the editor too deeply. I'm just going to skim it. So what you see is what you get, drag and drop editor. Where basically I can drag in sections. I can copy, edit, delete. And this will be my content. Up here is where I set the name for the template. I always recommend that, otherwise it's untitled and easy to get confused. But basically just put in the content that you want to send out, hit save, and you can attach some small documents. I recommend keep them. We allow up to 4 megs, but I really suggest it under 1, because people on data plans may not be too happy with a large download. But yeah, so put your sender info, your content, save and proceed, then select recipients. The default is all potential recipients in this opportunity. So it's basically going to say all the people in this opportunity, and does a little quick search for you, that have an email. So they have an email and it's marked as communication preference yes, will receive this. You could add additional filters that would allow you to kind of reduce this to only certain volunteers in the group. So maybe you'd only pull up the men or the women or people under a certain age because maybe you only need documents from them, and so on and so forth. So, and then you can put in some emails, kind of raw emails here if you want additional people to get a copy. So it runs a search, probably just run with the default, save and proceed, and then confirm is where you can send yourself a test copy, always recommended. Then when you're ready to send it out, hit send it now, send it on a certain date and time. I'm going to send now, and you're done. The communication will now show up under newsletter, have our default term for it, and you'll see all the communications that you've ever sent to volunteers. Here it is, pending. So we're doing our back-end search and getting ready to send it out. Once done, it'll be completed. If you're still working on it, saved only. So that's how you can communicate from an opportunity. You can also email every volunteer in your entire database. And for that, either create newsletter from this page or create new from Communication Center. And you basically get the same exact flow, but on the second step, instead of being restricted to just the volunteers from that opportunity, it will pull from every volunteer in your entire system, as long as we have an email and it has the communication preference of email, yes. And so that tool will let you communicate with your volunteers. There's also another tool. It's this inbox feature here that lets you send individual emails and get the responses back. So this is a cool feature. It's basically an email client built in so that you can send emails out individually to volunteers. They hit reply. It's going to go to a special email address, so you don't set your sender email, and that email address will route it into this system, giving you a central location from which all staff members can review the communications for that. Your newsletters, by the way, don't do that. However, there's a trick. Send yourself an email via this system. The sender email in that, use as the sender email for your newsletters, and any responses should feed into here. So, should work. Never actually myself tried it, but figured I'd relay the idea because. Alrighty, so that's everything I had for getting you going. We didn't obviously cover every feature, but hopefully that's enough to get you started and get you into trouble, as it were. So we covered some basic configurations, adding volunteers, searching for volunteers, creating custom data sets, application forms, creating opportunities, and managing opportunities, and then lastly, communicating with your volunteers. So hopefully everybody get something useful out of this. If you have any questions, I do a webinar every Wednesday at 11 o'clock. You can also communicate with the Volunteer Action Center that you're working with or email support@fundly.com. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great day and talk to you later.